We will carefully consider all input to make recommendations to the Legislative Assembly on what should be included in Budget 2024. The committee intends to release its report in August. I'll now ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with the Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Tom Spitka. I'm the Deputy Chair and the MLA for Kootenay East.
Adam Walker, MLA for Parksville Qualicum.
Bruce Bamman, I'm the MLA for the riding of Abbotsford South.
Ron Ray Leonard, MLA for Courtenay Comox.
Susie Chant, MLA North Vancouver Seymour.
Ben Stewart, MLA for Kelowna West.
George Chow, MLA for Vancouver Fraser View.
And assisting the committee today are Karin Riar and Emma Curtis from the Parliamentary Committee's Office, and Amanda Heffelfinger and David Smith from Hansard Services. For today's meeting, we'll be hearing about a variety of topics including forestry, healthcare, rural needs, and emergency preparedness. Each participant has 5 minutes to speak, followed up by 5 minutes of questions or comments from committee members. I would ask the committee to limit their questions and be brief as possible to answer as many questions as we can. And the participants as well to limit their answers and or comments so we can get as many questions coming forward. Our first speaker is Robin Hooper, Columbia Shuswap Invasive Species Society. Robin, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, followed by 5 minutes of questions and or comments. The floor is yours, Robin.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the Standing Committee. My name is Robin Hooper, and I'm the Executive Director of the Columbia Shuswap Invasive Species Society. As a witness to the BC Budget Review, I have some key messages to present on behalf of our board and staff, and I will note that our organization is also an affiliate of the Provincial Invasive Species Council of BC and a part of the Regional Invasive Species Organizations of BC. So we share similar key messages. There are 3 topics and recommendations I would like to cover today, which include, firstly, the invasive species threats to the Columbia Shuswap region, 2, regulatory tools and best practices to prevent and manage invasive species, and 3, the need for long-term stable funding for invasive species and how we as regional nonprofits can help with these recommendations. Here in the Columbia Shuswap, we are particularly concerned about zebra and quagga mussels, given the importance of our freshwater ecosystems, their recreational, hydropower, and indigenous and other values. I'd like to quote from a recently released provincial report on the impacts of these mussels. Zebra and quagga mussels are aquatic invasive species responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in economic damage annually in North America. Since their introduction in the 1980s to the Great Lakes, these mussels have been found in over 24 American states, as well as in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. To date, these mussels have been prevented from establishing in the Pacific Northwest. However, favorable habitat conditions in BC's freshwater systems make them a significant economic risk. These mussels pose significant economic risk due to their impacts on infrastructure and water bodies. The updated report has the annual cost estimates, which range from $64 to $129 million. That's just to manage these mussels if they were to come to BC. So these costs include costs to water-related infrastructure, hydro infrastructure, water supply infrastructure from municipal, domestic, and aquaculture, agricultural irrigation and golf courses, annual maintenance to boats and marinas, lost profits and provincial revenues from losses in water-based non-resident tourism, annualized loss in residential property values and property taxes due to reduced water quality and lost shoreline amenity values. This isn't including the environmental impacts. So we need provincial regulations to prevent these and other aquatic invasive species, such as invasive fish, whirling disease, spiny water flea, and many others from entering our province. This is not to mention the hundreds of invasive plants. Regulatory tools are needed to protect our ecosystems, our tourism recreation values, as well as water quality and hydropower resources. In the past few years, we have had success in increasing our water monitoring for invasive mussels here in the Columbia Shuswap region with partnerships from the province and the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. These programs support early detection and rapid response that are vital in the fight against invasives. Our society is uniquely posed to support these efforts with over 26 funding partners and over 200 partnering organizations in the region. We leverage provincial funding 7-fold with other funding sources and therefore greatly increase the return on investment as a nonprofit charity. We also have unique regional and community ties to get work done on the ground, and we partner with Indigenous communities, local governments, industry partners, land managers, community groups, and other stakeholders. However, more is needed. We need to update and enforce regulation to ensure that invasive species are not introduced and spread into and across the province. Current regulation has outdated lists of invasive species, enabling many to slip between regulations. As well, mitigating climate change impacts requires strong, efficient action against invasive species to protect resilient ecosystems that are vital in helping reduce the intensity of wildfires and floods and in protecting species diversity. Finally, stable long-term funding is required, and we need a new approach to funding to ensure BC is protected from these invasive species threats. We receive annual funding from the province, but it is not reliably secured long-term. We also need to ensure that the provincial staff and program capacity in the province has adequate funding as well to complete the regulatory and management work described, as well as for them to partner with regional groups such as us. It takes a team effort to control and prevent invasive species, and we have so much valuable biodiversity in this region and across the province that is worth protecting now and for future generations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Robin. I have one question at the beginning. You talked about the success in water monitoring. Can you describe the success?
Yeah, we have monitoring across this region and a number of water bodies. We prioritize, or with the province, we prioritize the high-risk water bodies, so lakes like Shuswap Lake and Basket Lake, the Revelstoke Reservoir, so facilities that have hydropower and recreational values, but also have the freshwater habitat in which mussels could be impacted. So we've been doing monitoring for the last, I want to say, 8 years in this region, and every year there's been a little bit more funding, I think, allocated to this work, and the importance of it is really well recognized by the province and by other partners. The Shuswap Watershed Council, for example, is another nonprofit that supports this work in the region. So yeah, we've seen success in terms of actual on-the-ground monitoring, and then the other successes that we've found no mussels, and we've been increasing our outreach in terms of talking to marinas and boat industry groups to prevent their spread and introduction.
Perfect. Thank you. Tom.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Robin, for the super important efforts that you're doing here. This is about preventative maintenance, full stop. I mean, invasive species are just, it's disastrous once they take over. I guess, how do you, is there a way you can eliminate, like, I mean, I know in the Great Lakes, once they take hold, it's just like they're razor sharp, they're like concrete, they just totally take over. Is there an elimination? Is there actually something you can do to kill them? I don't think there is, but maybe you'll explain that. And also, I don't know if you mentioned wildlife issues as far as grazing, cattle, forage in the backcountry, they can take over, can eliminate those species as well. And then, of course, Modi and BC Hydro and all these other stakeholders or government agencies that can spread. What in legislation do we need to see that we can control this stuff?
Yeah, great questions, Tom. So first off, there is a number of ways to look at the costs here with mussels, and so the report has gone into detail with just the cost of maintenance, because there is no way to eradicate them. So that figure, 64 to 129 million annually, just to that would be maintenance of mussels once we get them in the province. So there are some more options now than there used to be in terms of ways to manage it, but the costs have significantly increased then from the original study that was published years ago. So no options for mussels once we get them, or I shouldn't say no options, but management options, right? No ways to get rid of them. Secondly, you asked about those government agencies and regulations around invasives. So, like I said, it takes a team effort. We need all of the government agencies, all the stakeholders on the ground, all of our partners to work on invasive species. They don't know boundaries, they don't know borders. And so that's where I said in terms of funding pieces, we need it both for provincial agencies and the groups supporting that work. So we help as contractors and grant receivers with this work, but we need the provincial agencies themselves to be doing the work, because a lot of the spread can be on Crown land as well. And in terms of regulations, I think, like I said, there's a number of outdated invasive species lists, and what I see as one of the main pathways of spread, or we've seen, is the horticultural industry. So right now, invasive species can be sold, and there's no regulations around the sale of invasive species. So this means that we can be doing the work to prevent a whole bunch of species from entering, and there are some regulations around private landowners having species on their property, but there's no regulations around them buying those species. And so I think regulations around the sale of invasives would be top priority, and some regional districts have actually done regional bylaws to manage that risk.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your comments, and this is a big issue in our region in the Okanagan Water Basin. I wanted to ask you about the inspection sites, which you didn't mention, but they're a big part of stopping boat traffic, if you want to call it. And my understanding is that it started, I think, 12. And it's now only 6 stations. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering if you can provide us an update. Secondly, another area of, I guess, intrusion into the area is floatplains, which was brought up by the Shuswap Water Basin Council. And I'm just wondering, have you openly been discussing that as a group, and how you communicate with where floatplanes dock and making certain they're not bringing in the same thing?
Yep. So, first off, the watercraft inspection stations is run by the Conservation Officer Service, so within the province. I can answer just from based on their recent report, what I've seen in terms of where their stations are located is it's based on what they've seen in terms of traffic flow. So they've every year been doing surveys about where they see folks coming in, and because the border services are also helping with protection, I think I think with the funding that they have and where the highest risks are, that's how they've managed the number of stations, where they're open, the time they're open. So they're not, we don't have 24-hour dawn to dusk every roadway, like you say, is covered. So there's definitely pathways of watercraft potentially coming in. And so that's where I think continuing to, at a regulatory level, ensure that invasive mussels are prohibited and that folks know about that, but then the funding that goes into that watercraft inspection program continuing, I think it's also coming to a decision point around that. So continuing to see that important work as prevention. And then you asked about float planes. I know that was another part of the work that the province has done. So one of the staff members that I know has worked on that at a regulatory level and outreach as well with the different agencies around that. So I think that'd be a follow-up at the provincial staff level to see where that's come. If there's been any new rules and regulations, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, Robin, thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon. The next up is Sarah Newton. Sarah, you have 5 minutes for your presentation and 5 minutes for follow-up and or questions or comments. And I would remind committee members that we have a full schedule in front of us today. So, Robin, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Sarah Newton. I'm with WildSite Revelstoke. We're an environmental organization in the interior of BC. We have 16,000 members and supporters in WildSite. And I'm also a representative of the Environmental Justice Committee with the BC Teachers Federation, and I'm a teacher here. I want to thank you first for recognizing the Sinixt as a First Nation in this area. Oftentimes people only do the 3 Indigenous groups, so thank you for recognizing the Sinixt. The province is committed to shifting the paradigm in how we manage our natural resources, specifically through the Old Growth Strategic Review Panel's document. And this is a profound shift, and I want to thank you for your roles in bringing that forward. It's totally critical, and this shift requires funding and money. Otherwise, we'll be continuing to tinker with the old policies that we've had instead of addressing this paradigm shift that has been so well laid out in the Old Growth Strategic Review Panel. The deferrals have come in, and in our area have been approved by First Nations groups, but we're not seeing any real money targeted in this proposed budget to move ahead with the recommendations that have been put forward. And we're in the middle of a profound climate crisis. The temperatures you're seeing today in Revelstoke are so far off the normal. We should I moved here 18 years ago. There was still snow on the soccer fields in mid-May. That was normal. This is a mountain community. We need to help repair the forests. They are the lungs of the planet, and I really urge you in your positions of power to move forward with these policy changes because they are critical for dealing with climate change. The first recommendation is securing conservation agreements with First Nations for deferred and important conservation areas, which would mean the allocation of $300 million in provincial funding to be conjoined with matching federal, private, and philanthropic funds to the expected nature agreement to the Conservation Financing Fund to secure new Indigenous protected areas by Conservancy or another legal mechanism linked to protecting high conservation value old growth and endangered forest ecosystems in BC. Funds are to be allocated to affected First Nations for the implementation of alternative sustainable economic development visions and stewardship jobs. Legally mandated corporate compensation for logging, mining, and oil and gas companies should be additional to this. In a community here in Revelstoke, the mill employs about 400 people with living wage jobs, and they should not be abandoned. The second recommendation is the creation of a $120 million solution space fund to provide immediate financial support to First Nations to ensure deferrals are economically viable, including compensation for lost logging revenue and employment. In areas where First Nations have overlapping claims or where First Nations have not approved the deferrals, change the default continued logging to stop logging, a moratorium, until the complexities are worked out. The status quo should be to keep the trees standing until there's a solution in place, and a solutions fund space would help offset any economic impacts of this action. And the third and final recommendation is a fund to transition to a restoration-based economy. Our relationship with the natural world continues to be extractive, and we would love to see the creation of a historic investment in a new conservation economic stimulus initiative that could help offset a declining forestry industry. The new vision for our forests is to leave primary and old-growth forests intact, to make more with less, and support local producers as well. To heal this land and its waters by employing forestry workers to rehabilitate lands and streams. To use the same bulldozers that have punched roads into our valleys to take back the roads so that caribous, fisher, salmon, and grizzly bear have a chance in the face of a rapidly changing climate and landscape. From first-hand experience in this area, I can tell you that the forestry sector workers know as well as anyone that there is so little left to log. Just take a look, I beg you, of Google Earth of this area, and you will see how little there is left. And the Strategic Review Panel's documents are well thought out, and the steps outlined above will help people and the natural world to have a chance of success amid the climate crisis. As a teacher, I see so much despair in young kids, and I'm always instilling hope in them by saying the solutions are out there. Other countries are doing it. We just have to do it here. And those kids believe me when I say that the solutions are there and the leaders are seeing that needs to be done. So thank you for listening, and please, with all your decisions, think of the children. Thanks.
Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation, and given the time on the clock, I take it you must have raced from school to get here.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time out of your day. Adam.
We do appreciate this, and it's a really special part of the province. We were fortunate enough to come in by airplane and be able to see the whole region. Being in your position as a school teacher, I'm not sure what grade, but following your presentation here, you can submit a written presentation. It may be interesting to engage the students in that and have them talk about why these things that you're looking for are important to them, and maybe ideas that they have in this process as well. Could be an interesting presentation.
I could do that. Yeah, thanks. It's hard. It's a very big balance. You can't read them Greta Thunberg's book that, their house is on fire. You cannot do that to any children under 12 years old. We're trying to instill in them a love for the natural world, and then we move forward with how to change it. And there is hope because we live in a democracy. So,
Ben.
Thanks very much, Sarah. You made a comment about, and I'm not certain I completely followed it, but you mentioned the mill in town here and about some sort of solution or protection or something for them. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit more so I could be clear?
Yeah, the Green New Deal, which is quite a few years old now, talks about we need to support workers because it's often us against them, environmentalists against extraction industry, and it's not like that, especially in the forestry industry. There are ways of making value-added products, and there's an area that was just logged, McPherson, where we mountain bike, they logged for 12% cedar, and the hemlock, which was the majority of the other wood, is piled up and burned. But not in Germany. They have the mills kiln drying at a slower temperature for longer, and then hemlock isn't a garbage wood. So there's ways to get more out of the forest that we do not do in British Columbia by any stretch. You can't even buy toilet paper in British Columbia that's recycled. We're not using the pulp or the waste in Canada. We're selling it overseas, a lot of our pulp.
Okay.
And there's just more ways to be efficient.
Okay.
Are any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. I think this is your chance to give your plug to your students and what grade and what school.
I teach at Begbie View Elementary, grade 5-6. There's 20 kids, and it's really a privilege to teach them. They can read and they can write. They don't cry anymore, and they're not in puberty. They're really pleasant. It's a perfect grade.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah. I have a copy of my information. May I leave it with you? Over there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah. And just so the kids, if they want, the transcript is available on Hansard. So if they want to hear what their teacher said about them, it's available to them. So thank you very much for your time.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Our next presenter is Sue McRae, South Shuswap Health Services Society. Sue, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, followed by 5 minutes worth of questions and/or comments.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. Actually, Revelstoke is ancestral grounds for me because my family's been here for about 135 years. So there you go. There you are. Anyway, but I do acknowledge the land of the unceded land of the Shipnik. I don't know if I've got this right. Swetnek, Tuna, and Silkist, and that we share with them. So South Shuswap Health Services Society I started in 2013 because we live in a community of the South Shuswap, which is Area C of Columbia Shuswap Regional District. We have 9,000 to 10,000 people, and we have absolutely no services there. And since there, we have managed to get 2 nurse practitioners to another organization. We have a health center that we don't have primary care, but we provide lab services, all of the healthy choices. We do lots of seniors programs, exercise, healthy living. We have IHA there with social services, immunizations, and we have mental health. So this is all happening in our clinic. And so we started it because we want to have a health care closer to home. And I know it's only 25 kilometers from Salmon Arm where I live in Blind Bay, but some of our people live another 30 kilometers away or more. And we are a concentrated population the last census was 9,000 people and 13,000 when the summer owners come back in. So larger in some respects than Revelstoke. So take away all of the services in Revelstoke, and that's what we have except for 2 nurse practitioners and my clinic. So that's why I really I think it's important to support community health centers. We know we're in a healthcare crisis. We know we don't have enough support, and people are without doctors, etc. So a lot of the grassroots organizations began through the need to provide basic medical and allied services to their communities. And this has all happened over the last, say, 20 years. So the ask that we have is we would really urge the government to fund community-operated health centers, providing health care to the rural communities in British Columbia. And those of us that live in a more urban area, you don't have to worry about if you're pregnant going and sleeping in another town, paying for it, and being there for 2 weeks prior to the baby's born because there's no health services. So I might be in Blind Bay, but I'm working with the BC Rural Health Network, which I was a founder of, so we know when we hear what's happening in the rest of British Columbia. And so if there's any way that we can utilize the people in the communities to get that solution going and speak to them directly, I think that we'll go a lot further in eliminating some of the disparities that are happening right now. So the community centers deliver an integrated primary care, social services, etc. Now, the collaboration of the communities and those providing primary health care can help address the inequities. So I have to say that in our Copper Island Health and Wellness was not eligible for funding in 2023-24 because we didn't have primary care in we were just missing the doctor. But we have everything else. So because we didn't have that, we're not eligible for funding. So as I say, this is 9,000 to 13,000 people, and we are it. And we serve our communities well. And I would really like to ask, my ask is that when you're looking at community health centers, look at the whole of the work they do and the wholeness of what they provide and the value they provide to their communities, because it is significant. And so that's with the community health centers. And I have sent this in, so you should all have copies of it. That's good. So the next thing is healthcare closer to home. You know, I guess this is my clock, is it? Yeah, so I'm almost out. So what I want to do then is just go through the asks. I really ask that you provide support to the BC Rural Health Network. There are municipalities, there's several members across the province. They are the grassroots, they're on the ground. So we need to review our government policies and review the existing facilities in the communities to work directly with the communities to determine the best way to improve delivery of services. And a good thing to look at is in 1971, the hospital here was built, opened in February of 71, with full services, full surgical services, 3 surgeons in this area. The hospital doesn't provide that now. So I'm suggesting that from a healthcare point of view, take an inventory. Reduce your wait times in your operating rooms by utilizing the hospitals that have the facilities, as this one does, and Golden and others. And I think by taking away, when the regionalization took away from the communities, particularly in the north, and they regionalized them, they took away care close to home. They moved it away from them. So this hospital was run by a board, and that's the way it used to be. All hospitals were run by boards. They were run by boards, and we as a community, we supported that. We had a budget, we made it happen, it was overseen. There was no other interference with it but the board, Ministry of Health, and they were in touch with the community. The communities are now trying to get back in touch so that they can have not control, but help form what their community needs. So as I say, am I over time?
Yes, but we have some questions that are coming your way.
Okay.
So, Sue, thank you for your presentation. I'm sure that there'll be time to expand on that now. Susie.
Hi there. You'll be glad to know that there's 2, and I'm one of them, nurses in the legislature.
Wonderful.
So that's hopefully a start. Yeah. We're taking over the world. No. My question is, earlier you said you had 2 NPs that you shared or came from somewhere.
We have a nurse practitioners.
Yes. Yeah.
They're in Sorrento.
Okay.
And Sorrento and Blind Bay are both in the South Shuswap, which are now in. So
but are they attached to another organization?
They're attached to another organization. They are.
And what organization?
Well, that would be the Sorrento Health Clinic.
Okay.
They have primary care there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But they sort of come over and help you guys out too?
Well, we work together, but they have the primary care. But when our center
doesn't have the doc,
we don't have the doc. We're set up for it. We got completely set up for it. We were approved for a rural locum. And because our doctor that was helping us out got ill and could not facilitate it, we lost that privilege.
Oh, shame.
And we haven't been able to get it back.
Wow.
But we're set up for Dr. Reddy.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Ben?
Thanks very much. Sue, I just wanted to, when you said 1971, were you referring to Revelstoke or Sorrento?
Revelstoke.
Revelstoke, okay,
Yeah,
right.
I worked at the hospital in 1971.
Okay, yes, it was a much different time in healthcare when there was hospital boards, and I know what you mean.
But there were hospital boards. This hospital had, they had $1 million that wasn't in a foundation, but it was here.
Yeah.
And that $1 million, was lost during that transition. So,
I think your idea of an inventory is a very good idea.
I think take an inventory of what we have. The other thing that happens is that, there's fast-growing communities, and I didn't address that, but I'll do it very quickly. And so, the hospitals that were built many years ago were built out of necessity close together because it was horse and buggy. What? Horse and buggy. So, there was a hospital in Vernon, one in Armstrong, one in Enderby, one in Salmon Arm. And then all of a sudden our community came and grew. He grew in the 70s. And it's just been left as a bedroom community ever since. We don't even have a public health nurse. We have nothing there. We rely totally now. If you take Sycamoose, which is the same distance on the opposite side, and take an inventory of what they have, so I'm not sure why that disparity is there, but because we're a new community, relatively speaking, we get lost. Whistler grew at the same time we did. Just as a comparison, in the 70s. So not many hospitals have been built since the 70s.
Adam?
Yeah, I really appreciate this. Do you have a primary care network in the community that you're working with, or do you work directly with the health authority, or as you try to replace that primary care practitioner?
Primary care network is run through the Division of Family Practice. Mm-hmm. And each division chooses how they're going to run the primary care network. So because we don't have a doctor, mm-hmm. we're not part of that. So the Division of Family Practice doesn't include us. They have, I think Sorrento is, but we're not.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what. And the primary care networks are not working really well. They're not working really well, and I'll just say that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, if you have urgent care centers, why build an urgent care center in a hospital? Why not build an urgent care center out where the people need the help? That's just a question.
All right. On that note, Sue, thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon and taking the time, and thanks for the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Lisa Loveland, GSK Canada. Lisa, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, followed up with 5 minutes of questions and or comments. And Lisa, the floor is yours.
Perfect. So, hello everyone. My name is Lisa Loveland. Thank you for the opportunity for me to present today. While I'm here to represent GSK, I'm also here as a British Columbian with family members who've had shingles. Before we get started, I wanted to ask a quick question. How many of you have known someone who's been affected by shingles? Yeah. I'm happy to hear that. Well, not happy to hear that, but happy to hear that, because the statistics suggest that 1 in 3 adults over 50 years of age will develop shingles. And roughly half of those who live to be 85 years of age may experience at least one episode. So what that means is, if you personally haven't been affected, you probably know someone who has felt the pain of shingles. I'm here today on behalf of GSK to propose to the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services that money be earmarked for the development and deployment of a shingles prevention program for older British Columbians. Unlike medicine, which goes through a defined process for inclusion on BC Pharmacare, vaccination programs are not part of their mandate, and that is why I'm here today to request that designated funding be set aside for the 24-25 fiscal year and in future. In addition to reducing the pain and suffering for affected seniors, GSK believes that this addition reduces shingles-driven visits to your overburdened ERs to family doctors who typically diagnose and manage this condition. So for your information, GSK makes Shingrix, the vaccine to prevent shingles. Shingrix is a 2-dose vaccine which is well-researched and is recommended by the National Advisory Committee for Immunization for individuals 50 years of age and older without contraindications. So it's important to note that not only is it recommended nationally by NACI, there is also broad-based local support for a publicly funded shingles immunization program amongst doctors, pharmacists, those at risk of developing shingles, as well as frontline professionals caring for our most vulnerable seniors who reside in long-term care here in British Columbia. So I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the burden of disease. Shingles is caused by the same virus, varicella zoster virus, that causes chickenpox. After contracting chickenpox as kids, this virus lies dormant in the nervous system and may reactivate due to a weakened immune system driven by increased age or other health conditions. What this means is nearly every older British Columbian has had chickenpox and is therefore at risk for shingles. When the varicella zoster virus reactivates in the body, it often manifests as a painful rash. It usually involves the torso, but can also affect the head, neck, and even the face. The pain associated with shingles can be severe and debilitating and can sometimes last for weeks, months, or longer. Because it causes pain, shingles is also associated with high levels of opioid, benzodiazepine, and other painkiller use. We know that older patients want to maintain their quality of life, and many seniors work into their later years. Unfortunately, when you get shingles, it's hard to work because the pain can be so severe that this may disadvantage working seniors who are trying to make ends meet. From an affordability perspective, the majority of roughly 1.1 million BC residents aged 65 or over as of 2022 do not have private insurance to cover vaccines. Therefore, they'd be paying for this vaccine out of pocket. In the absence of a publicly funded immunization program, many older British Columbians will remain unprotected from shingles despite the availability of an effective recommended vaccine. Therefore, GSK respectfully requests that the Government of British Columbia establish and fund a publicly funded program for older adults. We know that this will support your healthcare system and prevent many from experiencing the painful condition of shingles. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you very much for your presentation. That was in Richmond, and I'm really hoping we're not going to hear the definition from Bruce one more time. But we do have somebody that has the definition, and we heard it from a pharmacist. And so for me, my question would be, at what age would you consider this to begin at? Because it was kind of left a little bit open.
Yeah, so when it comes, it's a great question. So when it comes to NACI recommends it for 50 years or older. However, when we look at other provinces, they go for, usually they'll start at either 65 and older, but we also have smaller cohorts such as just 65 or just 70 or just 80, and then over time they can potentially expand from there based on the popularity of it and how much they're saving the system.
Bruce, then Susie.
I'll spare my colleagues the anatomy lesson of how this works. I will, however, mention for the sheer enjoyment of Hansard that I'm holding a chrysalis berry in my hand, which you'd know as a gooseberry, but they told me I couldn't get that in, but that's another story. But I did want to ask is, what you did say is, now are you suggesting that considering that we have constraints on how much money can be spent,
right?
for instance, there are many of us whose secondary health or dental coverage, et cetera, will cover that.
Right.
So would you suggest perhaps that this should be a means-tested vaccine, or is that any of your thoughts in the plan, or?
I don't think I really want to comment on that part. I mean, I think it's open to whatever the government feels. So whether it's mean, whether it's cohort based, I think that's open for interpretation.
Okay.
If that answers your question. I think what I'm here today to say is that we need a program. What that looks like, that is open, let's just get started. When it comes to discussions with BC CDC, we've had those discussions and they're recommending it to the government, but this has been happening for a number of years. So let's just get started. Maybe it's 65 years or maybe it's means-based. I don't know. But I'm just here to make the suggestion.
Susie and then Ben.
I'm always amazed by the things I don't know. Is there a booster recommended?
So it's 2 dose.
It's 2 dose, but then you're done.
Yep, then you're done. We actually have 10 years safety data.
Okay.
So that is the other thing I was hoping I'd had time to cover off on, but there is 10-year safety data now too. Mm-hmm. So there's just no reason why there shouldn't be a public. I have family members who have been affected by it. Yep. Many of you have as well.
I've seen shingles.
So, and we know that it can be very debilitating. So there's just no reason not to have a publicly funded program.
Okay.
Ben.
So thank you, Lisa. You mentioned at the start about 1.1 million British Columbians were over 65.
Yes.
Maybe that's the starting point, not 50, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Have you got any idea about what the value of this would cost? What's it going to cost the MSP system to even do what
So what do you mean by MSB system? Sorry, public health?
That's public system.
Yeah, Ministry of Health.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me just scroll down. I do have some numbers I can share with you. Okay, so when it comes to the impact on public health, it is expected that shingles immunization program would help British Columbians 65 plus years and older avoid needing upwards of 116,000 physician visits over their lifetime for care associated with their shingles outbreak. As well, the program would avoid 46,000 shingles cases, 15,000 post-herpetic neuralgia. Susie, you probably know what that is. And it's basically the lasting pain that
just
can...
ongoing.
Yeah. It's to the point that, like, even with my mother-in-law, she couldn't have a shower because the water on her skin made her skin burn, and it was extremely painful. So that's what we say when it's post-herpetic neuralgia, and that's why they have to go and take, pain medication like opioids, benzodiazepines.
So what do you think the cost would be?
So it really depends on where you start, right? So if you start at a 65, then the cost would be associated for just that 65. If you would like some numbers, we can submit that formally as well.
Would be great.
I think you should.
Oh, you got numbers. Okay.
Okay. Lisa, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and your presentation.
Thank you.
Next up is Louise Pedersen, Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. Louise, you have 5 minutes for your presentation and 5 minutes for questions and or comments.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, committee members, and I really want to thank you for all your service to the province of BC and to this committee. This is actually the 5th time, I think, in a row that I'm speaking to this committee. The second time in in person. So as you know, my name is Louise Petersen. I'm the Executive Director of the Outdoor Recreation Council. And really it is a great privilege and honor to speak to you today from my hometown, Revelstoke. The ORCBC, the Outdoor Recreation Council, is a charitable society with more than 70 organizational members spanning the entire spectrum of outdoor recreation user groups. We give a collective voice to the interests and concerns of the organized recreation sector when speaking to government. We advocate for access to and promote the responsible use of BC's outdoors for public recreation and build capacity within the sector. And we indirectly represent more than 100,000 British Columbians. So outdoor recreation and access to nature is an integral part of the way of life for British Columbians. We know from a new Ipsos poll that we released last week that 7 out of every 10 British Columbians took part in at least one outdoor recreation activity in the past year. 80% of respondents said that access to outdoor recreation amenities such as trails and recreation sites and access roads and day use areas in their community and outside of their community is important. And this echoes findings from a similar poll that we did last year that also confirmed that 85% of British Columbians who participate in outdoor recreation support more government investments in the development and maintenance of outdoor recreation amenities. And I really want to say that I'm confident that these annual consultations actually make a difference because in this year's provincial budget we saw increases for operation and infrastructure for BC Parks and Recreation Sites and Trails BC, which are some of the two key partners that our members work with. And while these increases were relatively modest, they will help address some of the issues that I mentioned the last time I spoke to you. And I know that Mr. Stewart was here last year in Vernon when I spoke. So we're very thankful to the province for these uplifts, but also for providing the ORC with an endowment. We received $10 million to set up a granting program for recreation groups and First Nations. So we'll be developing that over the next year. So certainly, we are. So our message is that this progress that we've seen is excellent. Now let's build on it. And without proper support for this important sector, communities in BC and the province as a whole will miss out on many benefits. So I've got 2 recommendations. My first recommendation is the same as last year: increase operational funding and resources for BC Parks and Recreation Sites and Trails BC. While ongoing funds for recreational infrastructure is vital to expand opportunities across the spectrum to accommodate growing populations, it is equally important to point out that neither agency have sufficient operational resources to allow them to proactively and effectively deliver on their mandates with respect to public recreation. The context that land managers are in these days is really different from even just a decade ago, with added duties to consult with First Nations, more requirements for environmental and cultural heritage impact studies, and managing the damaging impacts of climate change to infrastructure. As we move forward, we need to recognize the need to invest more in staffing to allow both agencies to partner with First Nations on recreation projects, proactively plan, develop, and maintain trails, day use areas, and front and backcountry campsites, and respond to and approve applications for trail and site developments and maintenance from volunteer-led recreation groups in a more timely manner. And I would say, just with respect to that last point, it's not uncommon for recreation groups that are locally based to have, they put forward, really good proposals, and then they have to wait multiple years before they get approved, or even just hearing back that something was wrong with the application. I mean, that is very demotivating for these volunteer-led recreation groups. So more agency staff is needed, especially planners, biologists, heritage specialists, and Indigenous relations advisors in order to support the recreational staff out in the regions. I mean, I know Recreation Sites and Trails BC has got no Indigenous advisors. They've got no biologists, no planners. BC Parks is slightly better off. So while funding increases have been allocated in this year's provincial budget, there's still a massive backlog of recreation infrastructure, including the KVR, the Kettle Valley Railway, which I know those in the Okanagan is very familiar with, which was devastated by flooding events. Well, lastly, because I see that my time is up, we're also asking the province to dedicate more funding, more annual funding for road infrastructure maintenance to support the upkeep and repairs of roads that provide access to parks, recreation sites, and trails. This is actually one of the major issues that we are facing, that we are losing a lot of access to even the province's own sites and parks because roads are not being maintained. Sorry, I overestimated.
Oh, Louise, I feel like I've been on this really quick hike through the forest right now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Usually I cover more, but I was trying to focus on the staffing. The staffing is really a really key part that we hope will get addressed. Yeah. So, but now is your time to ask me questions.
Now it's your time to expand on those things.
Sure.
Susie.
Is there any component in the work that you're doing around accessibility?
Yeah, we've got members such as Kootenay Adaptive Sport Association and CRIS, so they are active in Kelowna to provide opportunities for people with disabilities too. We're definitely, we all on this learning journey to kind of understand what it means, because it's not just about people in wheelchairs. It's also about, people like you and me who might have a temporary disability or, might have had like new knees, that sort of thing. Making everything more accessible to elders, to youth. So this is certainly, the message that we are sharing with the provinces as well, that when we talk about accessibility, it's much more than just making things wheelchair accessible. There is such a thing as universal design, which helps trails being accessible for lots of different people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susie.
Louise, you spoke at the beginning about the $10 million and then turning it into an endowment.
Yeah.
So we have some time. Tell us what that's going to do.
Yeah, no, it is so exciting, because I know that Ben probably heard me say this last year that
No, I was there too, that's all.
Oh, you were there? Oh, sorry about that.
That's fine.
Yes, so all that money has now been invested. It's put away. It's drawing interest. We will only be using the interest from this endowment. So we are working on right now kind of creating the guidelines, determining what are the streams going to be. Initially, what we put forward was a trail fund proposal. The province decided that they wanted to make this an outdoor fund. So that means that it's actually going to be, I think that is a great gift, because it means that it will be, it'll provide opportunities for all our members. Our members also include BC Nature, the naturalists, and the anglers, the hunters. So this is going to be a fund that will hopefully, support all these recreation groups and First Nations and some local governments too that work on the ground to make outdoor recreation opportunities or to create experiences for the public.
Okay. Any other comments, or Ben?
Thanks very much. I was so glad to see that there was resources allocated, because, what it is that we hear from many different groups, and I was just looking up, we had the New Caledonia.
Yeah, Dave King was here.
Yeah, Dave King. Anyways, the part about it is that it's difficult to kind of put all of these things in kind of one bucket and figure out how to do it. But I think consistently we do hear about staff, and I think to Susie's point, accessibility, I think the government has made a big priority about accessibility, and I think that's probably an area where there might be some further support, but I can't speak for the...
That's a good word. It's a very good word.
Accessibility?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Yeah, there you go, you see. Yeah, make certain you add that to your repertoire.
Yeah. No, it's good to know that now, because we are sort of in the process of developing all this in consultation with our members and First Nations and local governments.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no other comments or questions, Louise, I love the vigor in which you present. You walk the walk, literally, for the organization that you have. And thank you for taking the time out of your day and your presentation today as well.
Thank you for inviting me to present. Thank you to all of you.
Our next presenter is Lisa Sear, United Way, British Columbia. I like that. There was a little bit of a tag. Like there you go.
We know each other from multiple realms.
Okay. All right. Lisa, 5 minutes to present, 5 minutes for questions or comments, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Committee on Finance and Government Services. My name is Lisa Sear, and I'm a regional community developer for the United Way of British Columbia. I live here in Revelstoke, and I work with agencies throughout BC's interior, supporting them and learning from them with respect to their healthy aging programs. Over the course of the past year, I've also had the opportunity to work on United Way of BC's emergent response planning and strategy work. and emergency preparedness grant streams for communities at risk. As we meet today, communities are facing in many places in BC, including Port Alberni, fires and other climate emergencies. I know you're all busy representing your ridings, and so I appreciate the time and the opportunity to present to you about this increasingly important issue affecting our communities. So in order to support United Way BC's work in emergent response, I come to you today with 3 asks that total $2.75 million. First, $750,000 over 2 years to take what we have learned to help 3 communities most at risk of future crisis, Cache Creek, for example. $1.7 million to invest in the 7 communities that are still recovering from the 2021 fires and floods, such as Lytton and the Fraser Canyon area, Princeton, Sumas Prairie, Yarrow, Sumas First Nation, Squaw First Nation, and Merritt. Lastly, $250,000 to bring together the nonprofit players from across the province into an ongoing forum to share best practices, improve our response protocols, and find more effective ways to prepare communities, provide advice to different levels of government on how the sector can mobilize and help rebuild. So why is United Way, traditionally community development, involved in this issue, and how are we different from other emergency responders, you may be asking? So in the past 3 years, United Way BC pivoted to add to our core work, helping communities in crisis. So communities and our network of social service agencies called upon us to step up as there was a need to coordinate the social services sector in terms of response. We showed up first with COVID in 2020, and then in 2021 for the fires and floods. During this time, we were able to work alongside communities and other responders to learn from them. From those learnings, we've developed a 3-pronged approach to help in a crisis as well as long-term recovery. So these are response, recovery, and resilience. So response. We work in conjunction with other agencies such as Red Cross and Emergency Management and Climate Resiliency, all within the first 24 to 48 hours. We work to mobilize volunteers, food, shelter, mental health supports, as well as begin the work of rebuilding social infrastructure. We look for gaps and seek out ways to fill them, whether this be through fundraising, matching volunteers to individuals, or resources and donations to those in need, including just putting out the call for that. Recovery. So this is done primarily through our funding streams, such as the United for BC Wildfire Recovery Fund. We've already funded 19 organizations following the Lytton fire through this fund, as well as the United for BC Flood Response Fund. We've already funded 54 agencies that were affected by the floods. And these are donations that are coming from British Columbians from across the province, which enabled us to provide rapid response support, funding, and supplies to communities. We tend to focus also especially on marginalized populations and those that may be left out of traditional emergency services response. So, and we also provided 26 local love grants to individuals who had ideas on how to help community members in need within their local communities. Lastly, resilience. It's our MO to build back better. So we do this by strengthening vital connections in communities through programs like High Neighbor to ensure that the community is stronger than it was pre-crisis, because we know that a connected community is a more resilient community. We also work alongside communities to help rebuild social fabric and infrastructure through community and planning tables, supporting events, and helping break down isolation barriers. In the past 3 years, we've learned so much from communities about their needs and building community. Our strengths lie in the fact that we have boots on the ground. We employ local staff and work with local agencies, as well as have the partnerships and support of governments such as the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and we work with other agencies and responders such as Emergency Management and Climate Resilience. We're well positioned to respond to emergencies impacting communities and work with them through the stages of recovery and beyond. So as we enter an era in which climate disasters are increasingly likely to occur and impact communities, we know that we bring value to the table. We are a trusted partner, and we are a trusted partner of the province, and we bring donors to the table to help support communities affected by disaster. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. Bruce.
Thank you very much. And as you know, a region that was in the heart of the floods in the Sumas Flats, I thank you for the work you do. I also have, we need to consider that actually the largest, I believe, loss of life for natural disaster would have been the heat dome. 600 individuals lost their lives. So I get some phone calls all the time on this, and there's a couple of things spring to mind. Would your organization be able to help deploy air conditioners for the vulnerable and be able to help fund for those air conditioners, or work with others? Is that a task that you could take on and tackle and find a way to help, number one? And number two, there's been many incidences where people thought they were going to be covered by government funding, only to find out, due to the fact that, for instance, I'll give you a prime example, a woman had leased out her farm because her husband had passed. She had a rental accommodation on that farm for seasonal workers, but because that was no longer technically working for her, that was not covered anymore. So it was not a big ask. It was about $60,000 to restore that so that they could bring the workers back. But she fell through the gaps. Are those the types of issues that your organization would be able to help with?
To be honest, I'm not so sure about the second one. We do tend to focus on, community tables, unmet needs, and things like that, less so the actual individual support that goes to individuals from that perspective. But to speak to your first point, you're right. The heat dome, we did actually receive about $400,000 from EMCR for specifically heat dome and cold. So putting up shelters and stuff, we'd be more likely to put up a shelter than to distribute air conditioners. However, this past year we have distributed a grant, $1.5 million for seniors specifically or agencies that would be supporting seniors in their communities. And this can be sometimes portable air conditioners to be loaned out. We do know that the bulk of the deaths were seniors. And so that was the response to that, is working directly with the agencies and communities to find out what they need the most and then respond in that way, so support them to do what they need to do.
We have Ben and then George.
Thanks very much. Lisa, I recently been working on the White Rock Lake fire recovery and was meeting with the regional district, and they had a particular issue with the water system that was compromised. There's a whole lot of things. But anyways, United Way stepped up with some people that weren't able to afford this $5,000 new pit meter that they had. So just thank you on that. And anyways, they are rebuilding back. There's lessons to be learned, but I think it's really important that when you do kind of come out, et cetera, people know what you do and not do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but anyway, so thank you.
Yeah.
George.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your service, and I actually was, really curious as to your actual operation in terms of deployment, because, your organization is well known, and I only know it as an agency that actually distribute funding to the various organizations very successfully, very extensive in terms of the organization that you give funds to. But you actually now have people who actually carry out some of the work. And how big is that compared to your original objective of funding?
Yeah.
And you mentioned you work with the Red Cross, so you just want to get some ideas to this portion of your operation. Yeah.
So we remain funders. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't change. But we do, with some of the funds, for example, some of the government funding or even some of the donor funding, will employ someone locally to community builders, for example. So in somewhere that may be more at risk, we may do some preemptive work. We'll have someone on the ground to help create those social connections and build that net. Whereas in terms of rebuilding and recovery, then definitely we're sending in community builders, community engagement specialists to do that work, in addition to the tables and the gathering of the social service agencies and other agencies, corporations, businesses, government, all the multi-stakeholder tables. So this is a new area for us, and we've devised a matrix to decide whether or not we're going to move onto the ground into a certain response or not, in order to be most effective with the funds that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Lisa, thank you very much for your presentation and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Next up is Joanne Galler, Revelstoke After School Society. Joanne, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, followed by 5 minutes of questions and or comments. So Joanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Good afternoon, Committee on Finance and Government Services. As the Executive Director of the Revelstoke After School Society, I'm here to address a crucial issue that is affecting the most vulnerable members of our society, childcare and poverty. The lack of affordable and accessible childcare options is not only a barrier to parents' employment, but also a significant contributor to poverty, particularly for single-parent households. According to recent studies from Statistics Canada, the cost of childcare has risen by over 50% in the past decade, making it difficult for many families to afford quality care for their children while also maintaining a decent standard of living. The situation is particularly challenging for low-income families who spend a disproportionate amount of their income on childcare expenses. The consequences of this issue are dire. Parents who are unable to access affordable childcare face limited job opportunities and are often forced to take low-paying jobs that offer little to no flexibility or rely completely on financial assistance. We must also acknowledge and address the gender disparities that contribute to childcare and poverty. Women are disproportionately affected by this issue, as they are often the primary caregivers for children and are more likely to face barriers to employment and career advancement due to their caregiving responsibilities. By implementing policies that support women's workforce participation, flexible work arrangements, and affordable childcare that is inclusive to all households making under $200,000, we can reduce the gender gap and empower women to achieve their full potential. Childcare isn't just early childcare centers for 0 to 5-year-olds. It also includes 5 to 10-year-olds. It also looks like before and after school and summer camps. In British Columbia, many families are struggling to make ends meet. This is not anything new, including those whose income exceeds the $110,000 threshold and do not qualify for the current Affordable Child Care Benefit Program. These families often face a difficult choice between paying for childcare and other essential expenses such as housing and food. I urge you to consider increasing the threshold to $200,000 for affordable childcare benefits for these families. By doing so, we can ensure that children have access to high-quality childcare regardless of their family's income. Additionally, I would like to address the need for summer camp subsidies. Summer camps are an important resource for families, providing children with opportunities for learning, socialization, and recreation during the summer months. I just got my braces off yesterday. I apologize. These words are tricky. However, the cost of summer camps can be prohibitively expensive for many families, particularly those living in poverty. Summer camp subsidies would also provide a valuable form of respite for parents who often face additional stress during the summer months when children are out of school. By enabling parents to access affordable summer camp options, we can support their ability to work and provide for their families, further reducing the cycle of poverty. Finally, I would like to emphasize the importance of before and after school care subsidies. Many families rely on after school care programs to provide safe and structured environments for their children while they work. The cost of after school care can be a significant financial burden for low-income families, and many children miss out on these programs as a result. There are currently 895 elementary school spots in Revelstoke. However, the current spots available are only 88. This fall, the government has increased the CCOF payment from $1.40 off each day to $5 off each day. This is a great start. However, it's still a $400 a month bill. 10% of the provincial population are children 10 and under, and here in Revelstoke, according to the population and housing projections in March of 2021 from the city, children 10 and under make up 11% of the overall population, and it is increasing. Adding more childcare subsidies to all facets of childcare, not just the 0 to 5 childcare centers, will allow parents, particularly mothers, to participate in the labor force, increasing economic output and tax revenue. Childcare subsidies alleviate the financial burden on families, making them more have more disposable income and are more likely to spend a wide range of goods and services, which support local businesses and the broader economy. By supporting working parents and reducing financial barriers by implementing summer camp subsidies, after-school care subsidies, and increasing the affordable childcare benefit threshold can play a significant role in fostering economic growth within Revelstoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, for your presentation today. I have a quick question about you've really focused on the summer camps,
yes.
and what would be the ideal amount that we're talking about?
So, if you put all of the summer camps that are offered in Revelstoke together, on average, it's about $350 a week to put your child into summer camp, and some parents have to pay that. Last year, a friend of mine paid $2,000 for 2 months of summer camp. Yeah, it's a little bit of a tax write-off, but it's still $2,000 of summer camp that you have to pay for.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joanne. You mentioned the threshold. You've got it written in your document here. It's currently at $110,000 per year,
yep.
Moving it up to $200,000. How did you arrive at that number of $200,000?
Well, I sit on a board. Well, I'm the executive director of the board. There's a mom there. She makes $200,000 with her income of family, and she can't even make. She asks every month if she can move the invoice a little bit different. And so I was like, well, this is strange. Let me ask more people. So I put out a poll we have a Revving Moms poll, and I said, how much do you pay for childcare, and how much of you actually could to be part of this affordable childcare benefit plan? And they all made well over 110, and they all struggle to pay their bill at the end of the day. And most of the income that people are like working at CP or they're working for larger jobs here in town, they're normally making around $200,000. So over the 150 families that I asked, I took an average, and that's where I found $200,000 was basically where people could actually start paying on time for their invoices.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Well, Joanne,
thank you.
No, thank you, and for a person that just got their braces off, thank you. It must be they must be all new words to you today.
It is, and I ate like an apple yesterday for the first time in 40 years, and it was like amazing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So thank you for this. Childcare is a huge one, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation and your time here today.
Thank you.
Next up is Sydney Black, Nelson and District Arts Council. Sydney, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, followed up by 5 minutes with questions and or comments, and the floor is yours.
I did not get my braces off, so I have no excuses. So, thank you very much. Nelson Museum and Art Gallery, thank you. So, good afternoon, Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to present today. My name is Sydney Black, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nelson and District Arts Council. So, founded in 1969, the Nelson and District Arts Council is a nonprofit organization that serves the communities of Nelson, Regional District Areas E and F in the Kootenay region of the province. We serve over 20,000 residents and over 200,000 tourists annually. Our Arts Council has 9 dedicated volunteer board members, employs 1 3/4-time executive director, 1 part-time communications manager, 13 event contractors, and over 150 artists and arts workers annually. Our mandate is to stimulate, broaden, encourage, and facilitate the continuing development of artistic and cultural opportunities, projects, and activities in Nelson and District. We focus on 3 pillars of support: showcasing opportunities, providing educational opportunities, and working with regional, provincial, and federal bodies to ensure the needs of rural and remote artists and arts organizations are met. We've produced the longest-running art walk on the West Coast, which started in 1989. This free summer event where businesses act as galleries for local artists has spread to communities throughout the province as a result of NDAC initiating it all those years ago. Our largest project, the Nelson International Mural Festival, started 6 years ago, and since its inception has seen 45 murals installed across Nelson in public spaces. And with that knowledge that we've received in developing the festival, festival, we've been able to support 25 other communities across Canada as they initiate mural projects and festivals themselves. We have a Rural Artist Support Weekend, which provides the opportunities for regional artists to participate in educational workshops that focus on the business of art, which is something that's often daunting for creators. And these projects are a small selection of the community-centered work that we do, with additional programs supporting youth, individuals with diverse abilities, the dance community, and more. We support the local economy through artist support and presentation. We've been named as the sector representatives for the arts and culture on the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership. And like many other small rural arts councils, we create important programming that engages and connects our community, which is now more important than ever. The majority of our programming is completely free of charge and held in centralized, accessible spaces to ensure maximum opportunities for participation. And so our following recommendations to the Standing Committee are, number one, to increase the funding of the British Columbia Arts Council with a focus on operational funding and the newly designed Accelerate program. This is the most direct way that you can help to fund artists and arts organizations in our province. Rural artists and arts organizations need opportunities to access this vital core funding, and it's very desperately needed in our sector as we continue to navigate the effects of the pandemic. It's essential also that funding reflects inflation and cost of living increases so that our organizations can continue to provide stable jobs. Our second recommendation is to continue funding the BC Fairs Festival and Events program for charities, nonprofits, and free community events for the foreseeable future so that these incredibly important events are able to keep up with the inflation that they are navigating. From artist fees to insurance to venue rentals, everything is increased in costs, and it's going to continue to be incredibly challenging for these organizations to keep doing this work without the support of the government. And again, these events provide artists and arts workers with income, encourage tourist spending, and are vital in providing community connection. The impact is huge in rural and remote communities like Nelson, where opportunities for barrier-free gatherings are few and far between. And the community connection experienced at these events has also been proven, as we all know, to affect people's mental well-being and self-esteem. And our third recommendation is that many artists rurally are unable to support their practices due to increased costs of living in our regions. Artists are being forced out of their homes and are having to relocate in order to be able to support their families. We request that you consider implementing a guaranteed basic income and housing plan to ensure that artists and cultural workers are able to continue to reside in our small rural communities. When hosting artist forums, this is the main concern that's echoed back to us, is the lack of affordable housing and studio space, and we hope that the province will see this as a priority. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for having me so much, and if anyone has any questions.
Sydney, I'm going to start it off by saying your enthusiasm is on top of everything, but I have a question for you that will be not part of your presentation.
Great, I love it.
How long did it take you to get here, and how long is it going to take you to get back?
It took me 4 hours to get here, and hopefully if I get to leave before 4:25, it will only take me 4 hours to get back, but it will take me 5 hours to get back if I miss the ferry at 5 o'clock. So, yeah.
There we go. All right. Bruce.
Thank you very much. So first off, for those who can't see, you were wearing this T-shirt that said, "Art is political," and I agree with you. Even 500 years later, I don't think Michelangelo realized the political debate that he would have speared due to his statue, David. But the question I have for you is, I just let that one go, right? The question I have for you is on average, these free events.
Yes.
That are put on by either cities, communities, or nonprofits. Do you have any idea what the general ask for those events is versus what's the economic return that actually comes into and or how much money actually can some of these local artists that, the starving artist syndrome, which is very real, how much economic impact does it put towards them? Any of those, if you can sort of ballpark, that would be
totally
great.
I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I do know that Tiny Lights Festival, which is a festival out of Weimar, British Columbia, a community very close to Nelson, has a full economic impact report that I'll make sure that I forward along to you. And I also did work on an economic impact of the arts report for Nelson, but it was during COVID, so we didn't have the supply side, so it's not really accurate. I do know that way back in 2003, I believe the economic economic impact of the arts in Nelson and District was estimated to be at about $17 million, but there's lots of variables in that. And I think that any funding towards these festivals is massively helpful and important. So we have been really grateful to receive, between $20,000 and $40,000 from the Festival and Fairs Events Recovery Program, and that was amazingly helpful. But I know other organizations have had $100,000 in the community, so I think it all just really varies based off of the scale and scope of the projects that are being produced. But I think that anything makes a huge difference in the nonprofit world.
Okay, Ben, Ronare, and maybe George.
Thanks, Sydney. You mentioned about increasing the funding at the BC Arts Council. Do you have a number in mind? Second.
Well, we always love a good double that, but I do recognize that that is a large amount of money. I think the BC Arts Council gets approximately $35.8 million, $32.8 million a year. So, yes, anything to increase it, because that is the most direct way that artists and arts workers are able to access funding, and they already have all of the programs implemented and in place. And I think that the equity work that they're doing with this new, the new programs that they've launched in the last year is just so important and vital to small organizations to be able to access it as well. So.
Okay.
Ronare? We'll go through this. Ronare.
On the BC Fairs, Festivals, and Events, you distinguished for-profit events from it. Many nonprofits do charge at the gate fees, and I'm just wondering why you've chosen to separate out the for-profits.
I just think that there's like a difference in our funding models. So whereas we provide everything for free, it's completely barrier-free, and to have festivals that are, privately owned, private entities, it just feels like it's a different level of scale and of funding that's being received by the larger for-profit festivals that are selling out every year already and things like that. There have been definitely different spaces that have received significant financial windfalls, and I feel like potentially they might be in all right shape moving forward because they are able to, sell those tickets and things like that.
George.
Thank you. And you mentioned the figure of like over $30 million to the BC Arts Council. So we have increased that funding substantially in the last couple of years. And I don't know whether it's double or triple, but it's somewhere along there. So in terms of your organization, do you get other fundings? You also get money from, you would apply to the BC Arts Council, right?
Absolutely.
So what about your town, like Nelson? Do they contribute money?
Absolutely. So we receive money from the municipality as well as from the regional districts. We go wherever we can get money. I probably apply for 30 grants a year. So we're in Canadian Heritage, anywhere with the feds that is offering money, Canada Council. We also work with Creative BC, the Columbia Basin Trust, essentially Osprey Foundation, anywhere that we can try to get money, we do. And it is because we have this barrier-free kind of vision in place, and so we don't have the earned revenues that other organizations might have. We don't operate a facility. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sydney, thank you very much for your presentation today. And I would be remiss if I didn't, for the record, to mention that it was Emily Anderson that pointed out your drive that was going to take you here today to me, referring to you as a good friend and awesome. But I also wanted, for the record, also note that she did not take the 3.5-hour drive herself to make it out here to join you today.
I will send her a text message as soon as I'm in the vehicle, and we'll ask her. I know. I will tell her the standing committee is very disappointed, Emily.
And I have already texted her a picture of you sitting up front. So
okay, she'll love it. She'll love it.
She'll love it. Yes.
Exactly. I'm going. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next presenter is Sheena Wells, Community Connections. And Sheena, before you start, I would like to just announce, have a seat, that you are presenter number 200.
Oh, well, I like that.
Yes.
I like a tiny number.
And I believe that puts us almost halfway. Close to. Yes.
No, it puts us more than halfway.
Just more than halfway. So anyways, you are number 200, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Yeah, I know. Do I win? Yeah, totally. Great. Maybe I'll double my ask here. Yeah.
All right. On that note, the floor is yours.
Great.
Good afternoon, committee. I'm sure there's been some formalities, and I just asked if I needed to do a land acknowledgement, but I've been told that there's been one that's been done, so that's great. So, as a born and raised local here in Revelstoke, active community member, volunteer, and passionate executive director of the largest nonprofit social service organization in town, I'd like to thank you for the time to consider these recommendations. As a note, ChatGPT did not write this speech. I did, although we did talk about it amongst ourselves. Anyway, I've had the honor of working in this profession for the last 16 years in Revelstoke, locally, regionally, and across the province and across other province partners. And I'm pretty excited to be able to share this. I'm a bit of a storyteller. And so that is my way as a social work leader and a therapist with training and background in that. So where 1,000 words is my way and 100 would do just fine, I will try and keep this short. I did print it off. And I also believe in principle that we make meaning through relational context. So some of what I'm going to make recommendations on or elaborate from my recommendations are with that in mind. Our organization has been operating for over 40 years in this community, providing a wide range of services, holding many different government contracts to support the community's most vulnerable individuals and groups who are up against the most complex challenges in our society as a whole. Our work spans the lifespan, offers support across all struggles, and is committed to serving the community in a responsive way. And just as a note, we were just nominated for one of the the award for top food bank in Canada for our size, and so we operate the food bank as well, but not a funded operation. So just we're doing things locally. It's a small town, but we are certainly connected provincially and federally as well. Until December, we have grown to have about 80 staff across more than 35 programs and are on track to pay about $3 million in wages for local residents, local spending, and purchasing for program supplies this year. We bridge gaps created by the holes and lack of funding in many areas. Every dollar has about 3 different deliverables on it, and every hour has about 90 minutes. Most staff wear so many hats, paid and volunteer in a variety of roles, that we will all need physiotherapy to see us into our later years of employment. The recommendations I put forward, I'd like to summarize each with a brief explanation, and then, of course, welcome questions. So the first one, localized, stable funding for supporting children, families, and individuals requesting mental health and community support. I see in the budget that there are increases to mental health and addiction support in terms of funding going out. However, what I think is really important in terms of the budget, in terms of what these recommendations speak to, is the localized context. I hear a lot of centralized, I hear a lot of provincial procurement language, I hear a lot of this is how we do it in the Lower Mainland, and that can be really difficult for us to try and navigate and serve rural, remote communities. So what I'm saying here bears repeating, that centralization and regional service hubs are hugely detrimental to community well-being and the community feel, the built-in and served communities. Localized funding agreements actually have the benefit of going further for less money, as we can be responsive and preventative when there is trust and some flexibility in the collaborative service delivery approach. So for example, in the 40 years we've been delivering services, one of our contracts with MCFD, there hasn't been an increase in the FTE in that time, and then last year the contract was cut in half. And so, for the metrics to go up as inflation or increases to staffing, that kind of thing happen, and then to see that cut in half was really challenging because it went to a regional pot of money rather than what's happening in Revelstoke, whereas we have zero foster homes in town anymore, and there have been very few removals. Anyway, so the preventative investment in that collaborative community development model actually has put us in a position to not have to ask for more, and so this recommendation isn't about a dollar amount, it's about an approach, which does translate to a dollar amount on your end, but. Second recommendation for housing spectrum funding and operating agreements that are reflective of community need. So this is similarly to the local context, but essentially this is speaking to the gaps in the housing continuum. So in Revelstoke there is no supportive housing and no second stage housing for women, those kinds of things. And in lots of communities that is the case. There are different spots along the housing continuum that are serving what does the red light mean? Stop talking?
It was my fault. Keep going.
Okay. She's like, do you have to stop on the red light? I'm like, it's really going. Okay. So then the other spots along the continuum have to pick up the slack. And so when we're looking at operating agreements, we're looking for solutions that aren't written yet. And so that can be complicated. The provincial standardized models teach us a lot about what could be done, and those launches that happen, in bigger centers show us a pathway, but perhaps to meet community need in a meaningful way. Affordability and housing needs are unique, and so should the operating agreements and the contributions. On this one, I would like to say that our regional director has been fantastic, and I can't stress enough that the relationship that we have with Nanette, who's been in it a long time, really does help support communication between us and provincial parties and funders. And then an example on that as well, we were, the UBCM pilot project, we've been running an emergency shelter program with UBCM funding for the last 18 months, which has been hugely successful in learning, partnership, and community development, also effective in meeting local need in this area, yet the model we're providing doesn't exist within BC Housing, and the one they have would cost 3 times more. So we're putting forward, again, that local context. And the last recommendation is about nonprofit capacity and sustainability. She spoke, the previous speaker spoke a little bit to this. It's to increase administrative percentages allowable in contract budgets. So the burden of survival and effective service delivery in our unique context is inflated exponentially when we have 30-plus programs and services, all with multiple funders, applications, procurement demands with each, reports, data collection, storytelling, portal logins for each and every ministry. Contract is different. Various styles, questions, increasingly rigorous administrative policy, which of course is not always a bad thing, but hard to meet all of that with an 8% or in that 8 or 9% administrative percentage on those contracts. You know more about these pressures than I do. However, without the core funding and localized agreements, we have to ask for something more somewhere, and so this is where that the monetary ask I put forward in terms of a recommendation. We would much rather do more of what we do in the communities with the people we serve than the reporting, but of course we want to meet those needs too.
All right, Sheena, I will ask you nicely to
stop.
To wrap it up. I mean,
That's
you've
great.
got your 200 presenter bonus minutes.
Great. Well, because I'm done. So that's actually, I was just going to close and say that I would strongly advise, as often as possible, that relationships take precedent rather than contract language that is, yeah.
The chamber will give up one of its minutes to help.
No,
that's fine.
That's a kind offer, but it's not necessary right now.
No, we're good.
Sheena, just to start off, you talked about no second stage housing, and maybe just provide a little bit of historical background at what, when you're talking about second stage housing for women. Was there, what was there as opposed to what is there today?
I would love to. My mom started the women's shelter in Revelstoke 30 years ago. So there is a women's shelter, so there is that facility. BC Housing owns and owns, and there's an operating agreement. There's not ever been second stage housing in Revelstoke. There have been many asks over many years, and we're trying to find a model to get there. In my time, anyway. I can't speak to what was here before. Well, I was born here, so before I was born. And so I'm also the vice chair of the Housing Society, so we are looking at, Kira will speak next, but we are looking at, in our next build, or within the next 2 builds, putting forward a mixed-use building, because we don't necessarily need a full facility for each of those other spots on the continuum, but we could do something that's blended, some seniors, some second stage, and some Indigenous supported housing. So,
very good.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, not seeing any. Sheena, thank you very much for your presentation and your time today, and thank you for the work that you do in the community. Next up is Kira Wolf of Revelstoke Housing Society. Kira, you have 5 minutes for your presentation and 5 minutes for question and answer. And just for the sake of everyone here, the red light does kind of indicate you're nearing the end.
All right. I can't guarantee anything.
Ish. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today in Revelstoke. My name is Kira Wolf, and I'm here on behalf of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society. We are a local nonprofit dedicated to providing a range of affordable housing options within the city of Revelstoke. I'm not here today to ask for money to build houses. There is a lot of money out there for housing, but to explain the challenges we face as housing providers and to offer solutions for you to take back to Victoria. I'm actually also not here today to tell you what to do. Instead, I'm here to tell you what not to do. 1, do not leave money on the table because nonprofits can't access the funds. Over the last 10 years, BC has spent $7 billion on housing. That is a lot of money, but here we are still stuck in a housing crisis. We need solutions to remove barriers for smaller, newer nonprofits to access provincial funding. To apply for a housing grant, we need to produce audited financials going back several years, architecture plans, site surveys, and feasibility reports before applying. A nonprofit needs to front fees close to 6 figures. Our local economy doesn't have time for us to save or apply for grants to fund the grant application process. The turnaround time for our affordable housing units is 6 years between projects. My solution is to propose a system that enables municipalities to submit master plans on a one-time basis to funding partners to develop stage affordable housing plans for larger developments. Each phase would have a separate review period for additional funding. My other solution is to improve access to capital funds for development. Many of the operation grants go towards societies offering heavily subsidized housing, rightfully so. However, our current operation does not fall under many of those categories. We generate revenue to run our operations from rent, but it does not leave enough money for a quick turnaround in the development process. Nonprofits need access to capital, whether in the forms of grants or low-interest loans to fund the early development stages. 2, do not allow nonprofits to struggle while maintaining operations during an inflationary period. Once a building is complete, it falls on nonprofits to manage or contract the task out at considerable cost. There is not a lot of property management resources for small nonprofit societies. For example, the BC Housing website, under the Resource for Property Manager tabs, it only mentions bed bugs and mold. Those are serious issues, but there is more to property management than those 2 issues. My solution is to increase funding for BC Housing or another housing partner such as BC Nonprofit Housing Society to create a dedicated central resource for nonprofit housing operators. The first would be legal counsel. This isn't just a nonprofit issue, this is a tenant issue as well. While nonprofit workers might have the best intentions, if they incorrectly apply the rules of the RTB, they risk hurting to the tenants too. Second, create an annual inspection from BC Housing. Having one consistent oversight will create continuity during staff changes and reduce knowledge gaps. A yearly maintenance supervisor with a dedicated region will visit the nonprofits to develop a consistent report of the property. The report will be done in conjunction with local staff and will make asset planning and capital planning easier and more transparent for all parties. Third, hire a human resource director for the sector and develop an employee support program. As housing grows, our sector will only be expanding, and however, money will always remain tight so we can keep rents low. Providing resources for nonprofit societies that would normally be very expensive to bring in-house or outsource will allow us to focus on tenant well-being and expand the housing supply. Number 3, do not slow down construction by saddling small communities with the burden of updating and increasing utilities due to government policies. Revelstoke's permanent population and seasonal population are growing rapidly. According to the 2021 census, the population grew 9.4 over a 5-year period. Ottawa's plan to welcome 500,000 immigrants to Canada yearly means more people living in Canada, and those people will need a place to live. Before nonprofits can build more housing, we need roads, sewage treatment, potable water supply, and electrical lines. The Growing Communities Fund is a great initiative, and the $1 billion distributed amongst 188 municipalities will be a welcome addition. However, if we hypothetically divide that equally amongst all 188 municipalities, that comes down to a little over $5 million each. Additionally, the new e-bike rebate proposed by BC is wonderful, but it will increase the number of e-bikes on the road. The riders need a safe place to ride, and that means more road maintenance. Please do not leave residents of small municipalities paying more in taxes because of government policies. Local municipalities are often left with passing the cost to local taxpayers, which only exacerbates the affordability crisis in our area. I propose that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure extend additional funding for local municipalities to improve their infrastructure to meet growing population needs. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my suggestions today. I open the floor to any questions.
Kira, thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon. Adam.
You packed a lot into 5 minutes, so I appreciate that. I've got a number of things I've highlighted here, and the one I'm just wondering if you can expand on is this master plans for local governments. What does that mean?
It's something I sort of made up. I took inspiration from the way it works just in the private sector, that if you are building and say you have property that's zoned for multiple units, you kind of have to go through stages of funding. So you get funding at one point, and then if everything goes well, you get a little more funding. I think that could work really well for nonprofits. That way we're not all trying to get one big chunk at once, that if we had a larger plot of land, we could have one building. Everything goes well, you got BC Housing sees that we are responsible, that we did a good job, then maybe we can go on to the next phase. That instead of having to submit multiple applications, work with multiple developers and just go through the process multiple times.
Makes sense.
I really like your presentation in the sense of what not to do. Because I come from a place where somebody says, don't touch that. Like there's a little thing that says, don't touch that. I want to. But you talked about the Growing Communities Fund. And maybe it's too early or not, but have you been earmarked for any of that funding from the local government?
I'm not sure.
Oh.
Nope, I just know that we have a lot on our plate with our community growing, the 9.5% number. Right now, the estimate is for us to keep up with growing population needs, we need to have at least 1,000 new units at a minimum in the next 10 years. And those places will need roads to drive on, they'll need stoplights, that will need the sewage treatment. We have a lot that we need to maintain a growing society. And I don't think I did the 5 million just evenly. I didn't know.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions? Bruce?
Coming from being a former mayor, I want to thank you. Because what you've said is very true, that a lot of times government policies get put in place with all the best of intentions, but the devil is always in the details. And you have packed a ton of details into 5 minutes, and you should be commended. And I don't know if your city council is ready for you yet, but you should definitely put your name forward, I believe, and run for city council if you haven't already. But
I'm an immigrant. I'm a permanent resident.
Well, okay. Well, when you are, we can work. You can work
no
on it.
Perfect.
That's a very easy fixable problem. But I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness. But I wanted to boil down on, you mentioned something in there with regards to. I'm trying to remember your exact wording. It had to do with making sure that we weren't layering stuff on top that was basically impossible for you to fit in based on the government protocols that were required. Did that have to do with building codes or?
Was that the first do not?
It was about 2/3 of the way through.
Let's see. Capital funds, solutions, or construction, or operations?
It was in the construction.
Okay.
It was in the construction portion. Anyway, I guess what I'm hearing from you say is that you want to reduce the red tape to be able to get this done and actually have a collaborative effort and bring municipalities and cities actually to the table to see if it's actually doable to help you. It needs that coordinated effort, which I full-heartedly applaud you on. It is the missing link, because what I learned is different levels of government don't always talk well to one another, so congratulations to you.
Ronna Ray.
Thanks for your presentation. I recognize that, different communities have different capacity levels, and smaller communities are going to struggle if they haven't had NGOs that have been providing affordable housing in the past. Have you looked at partnerships with other agencies, other communities, trying to grow capacity, even with developers?
We have. Sheena's on our board, and we met with Golden, their economic development team from Golden. I've been in contact with Caslo. We're reaching out with the groups from SLOCAN, just trying to find a way that every single nonprofit shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. We can do knowledge sharing, and I think we can somehow find a way working together. Right now, Sheena and I are exploring ways to maybe bring on our own maintenance worker through our different societies, see if that could help. I don't think it's ever been done before here.
Thanks.
Well, Kira, thank you very much for your presentation, and because you won't know this as you're forward-facing, but there are a lot of smiles, head nods that are behind you, that are supporting you 100% for what you're trying to do here in the community.
We all support each other.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Caroline LaChapelle of Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce. You have 4 minutes to... No, I'm just kidding. Okay. You have 5 minutes to present with 5 minutes for questions and comments, and you have...
What? Yeah, the kids? Well, no. My children are...
Mine.
Yeah. Revelstoke After School Society. How strange.
The floor is yours.
I'm the executive director...
Who are you here with?
Oh, this is okay, so I actually just started in this position 5 months ago, and Rowan is a project manager for the Chamber, so I'd like to have him as my helper if you have questions that he might know deeper understanding of.
Yeah. And Rowan?
It's from the Chamber of Commerce. Oh, what's your full name?
Rowan Hawgreaves.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
my
you.
English friend.
Okay, there we go.
I'm Caroline LaChapelle, the Executive Director of the Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce. The Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce has been an organization since 1895. In fact, since before the city of Revelstoke was the city of Revelstoke and incorporated. We have evolved with Revelstoke for over 120 years and have been the conduit for economic development, tourism, business growth, and much more during that time. Oh, is he getting his own? It's all good. You guys, I've practiced. I'm good. I'm so under 4 minutes. It's fine. Where was I? Okay, yeah. So we've evolved with Revelstoke for over 120 years and have been the conduit for economic development, tourism, business growth, and much more during that time. In our current format, we are the hub of connection for businesses, nonprofit organizations, and individuals who are professionals in their field. Chambers are one of the only organizations in Canada that advocate on behalf of businesses on a local, regional, provincial, and federal level. I'm sure you're all very aware of this. Our first recommendation is to expand provincial grant funding that is meant for nonprofit organizations to include chambers of commerce. As many know, chambers are organizations that help communities with social change and gather community members together with events, education, resources, and much more. We do not only work for our members, but for the business community at large. We rely on grants to help sustain our operations and recommend that the Government of BC stop excluding chambers of commerce in most funding streams that are made available for nonprofits, that you start to recognize chambers as viable organizations that are a fundamental part of the ecosystem of communities, and be more inclusive to including us in your provincial funding opportunities in the future. Yeah, we can chat about that after. The first one is a little bit selfish so that we can help you guys.
Thank you.
Continue to help you. Expansion of tourism funding grants to include all businesses in a resort municipality. Revelstoke is one of 14 resort municipalities in BC. The provincial government releases many wonderful funding programs every year that are aimed at supporting tourism businesses and organizations. We believe that businesses operating within a resort municipality should be recognized as a business contributing to sustaining tourism in those municipalities. Sectors such as trades, health service providers, community support organizations, and many other types of business are all a part of the ecosystem that sustains traditional tourism businesses. It's our recommendation that funding streams and services available for tourism businesses, such as the services of Go2HR, for example, be extended to all businesses inside of a resort municipality.
As the local chamber, we would like to ask who we can speak to directly at the provincial level to better understand and advocate for this underrepresented section of our community's business sector. How can we be a part of the conversation? How can we understand how the machine functions so that we can not only ask for things, but also provide you with metrics and information? What do you need from us as a resort municipality, and also on behalf of all resort municipalities? What do you need from us? We'll get you the things. You just tell us. We'll get you the info. Include industrial, commercial, institutional material in the provincial extended producer responsibility program to make it fair and inclusive for retailers, small businesses, offices, and schools. I can repeat that one. That's a big one for me. Businesses are facing increased costs. This is a no-brainer. As a policy adopted last week at the BC Chamber AGM notes, costs of recycling, particularly in remote or rural communities, are often too high for businesses to manage, and a large amount of waste is ending up in the landfill. We ask that the next provincial budget include adequate funding for expanding the existing provincial extended producer responsibility program to include waste from industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors which are currently underserviced, and support businesses in their recycling efforts. And we do not have a specific number in mind because we're coming to the table with the same question as before. How can we help? Where can we look at how we can expand on these things? That's it for me.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Caroline, for your presentation. Adam.
The last thing you had there was the EPR. What does it mean for businesses in this community? Like, what is the cost that a business would face to dispose of things that should be recyclable that are easier in larger centers?
So in Revelstoke specific, so this is very much so a municipal thing, right? Like some areas have recycling, some areas do not. In Revelstoke, if you want to bring cardboard, you have to, there's actually a joke where you have to dress up your staff in different costumes or ask kids or send people like disguised to take it to the local recycling area. Otherwise that you have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars. It depends on the business. It's very business specific. I would love to gather those metrics, and I could do them into subsectors for you. Happy to get that together for you and give you some actual information based on maybe the size of the business, or if they're a manufacturer or they're not a manufacturer, and so on and so forth. But yeah, nothing gets picked up, and we actually cannot bring recyclables that are paid recyclables like pop cans or alcohol containers to the recycling depot at all, whatsoever. Yeah. It's an interesting conversation because it shifts with every space. So it's like, what's the governing conversation here of who is going to be telling the recycling centers what they can and can't do? How can we help so we're not overburdening them as well? Is this a privatized thing? Is this a provincial thing? I'm happy to have that conversation, and I know that this, again, this was a policy that was put forward by some of the Kootenay chambers at the BC Chamber AGM last week that was passed, and that will be coming on your doorstep with a lot more information. Yeah.
It's interesting how you use the term conversation, because I think we were speechless when you brought it up. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because you brought up something, and I think we were all just speechless that it wasn't here. So
yeah, that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So just so you know, I also was speechless when it was brought up to me. I was like, I don't understand. What do you mean? So I didn't realize that this was an issue for certain areas. That there's this is an access issue, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
George.
Oh, yes. Just in reply to your comment about you cannot bring certain thing to the recycling depot, I think it does exist even for the city of Vancouver. They do have collection for bottles, and it's only items that you cannot take to the depot that they would take it. If you put it in that bin, they'll return it to you. So that's how it works.
Yes.
For example, if you put pop cans as a deposit in there, it will not be collected. So
for us in Revelstoke, as that happens to me as a private citizen. If I put, it's It's actually really nice. If my kids put stuff that I'm supposed to be getting money for, they just leave it in the bin and then I collect it and take it later on. But as a business, you have to pay quite a bit of money depending on the size. Again, hundreds to thousands of dollars to get your thousands and thousands of dollars to get your recycling picked up. So a lot of businesses are just throwing it in the garbage. So now we're dealing with the secondary issue, right? Would love to have the conversation. Yeah,
I think
a head
that's
scratcher.
certainly very important conversation in terms of recycling for businesses. I think for residentials, I think we are well on this way.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
I think,
The residential sector in British Columbia has improved quite a bit. It's been really wonderful to watch.
Ben.
Myself, I was just going to say, we just had presentations in Victoria from Recycle BC, and it doesn't probably address the commercial side of what you're addressing, but I think you should enter into conversations with them.
Yes.
Because clearly they are doing things and they're changing and they're deploying, like even unmanned recycling containers, etc. I think that there's a solution there, and it's meant to be accessible, not inaccessible. So I just don't think that you're talking to the right people.
I believe that the BC Chamber has contacted that body before, and I would love to pull that information from them, because usually a policy to be brought to the BC Chamber AGM, because we were very aware that we have to send it to you, and we want to take your time properly. We'll get vetted a little bit, but that's a really great point, and I'll look into that personally and send it back to the Chamber, who also put that forward.
Okay, so what I also wanted to really address was you're a resort municipality, so you have additional taxation authority to being able to tax.
The MRDT,
MRDT, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know where that's put to and stuff like that, but
I was referring more to businesses like tradespeople that are looking to access things like Go2HR, which is a really great funded program that gives what's not the word I'm looking for?
HR support?
HR support, mental health support for tourism businesses, but other businesses can't access it, but businesses in Revelstoke are all tourism stakeholders because we're in that resort municipality supporting that ecosystem. Not so much the MRDT money, like the funding and grants that are available for that.
You were asking the province to give some money to chambers. That's what you were asking, and that's why...
The first one, yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I was just addressing that in the sense that I don't know if there's any other chambers that are getting provincial money to support what it is. It is a business-driven organization, but I think we should introduce you to some of the other resort municipalities.
Yes.
And you should meet with them and find their solutions.
Wonderful. Yeah, we are asking for a quarterly roundtable with the other resort municipalities because it makes sense to just have that conversation.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very
sorry,
much.
Jim.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for your presentation this afternoon. To the committee members, there is one more presentation that we have squeezed in because the questions and answers have been on time and on point. So our last presenter of the day, not quite number 200, but the last presenter nevertheless, Jim Cullen, Revelstoke Heritage Railway Society. Jim, you have 5 minutes for presentation, and then followed by questions and answers. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to make these remarks, especially squeezing me in at the end. My name is Jim Cullen. I'm the Executive Director of the Revelstoke Heritage Railway Society. We're a non-profit cultural cornerstone here in Revelstoke, an annual budget of less than $500,000, serving about 26,000 visitors annually. At our peak, we employ about a dozen employees at the Revelstoke Railway Museum and at the Craigellachie Last Spike Historic Site. We are a year-round attraction, a year-round facility, and we were named by the province as an anchor tourist attraction back in 2021, one of only about 20 museums in BC. I want to make a contextual point and 2 recommendations, if I may. My first point sets the table for my 2 recommendations, and I want to envision a Revelstoke that encompasses a vibrant, thriving, sustainable heritage, arts, and culture community, both as core elements in our civic culture but also attracting and retaining engaged citizens. Museums can do that as a core element of the educational system, supporting truth and reconciliation, as a place for families to just connect and enjoy themselves, and as a key element in our tourist infrastructure. We are among the largest tourist attractions here in Revelstoke. In my role as a cultural leader in Revelstoke, I speak to a lot of people. I've just been here 3 years. None of them have expressed the desire for Revelstoke to become yet another powerhouse ski resort that has the ski resort as the dominant fundamental character that overcomes the fundamental Revelstokeness of our city. That's not the aspiration here. As nonprofits, we are forced to write dozens of grants to eke out survival rather than creating excellence. And it's not because we're deeply flawed. It's not good enough to say, try harder, write more grants, or find some volunteers. We now compete with essential services for funding, essential services such as food banks and school breakfast programs, and that's from things like the Columbia Basin Trust and our local trusts and other organizations. Nonprofits supporting other nonprofits rather than the province providing heritage with that support. There's something broken in this system, and we're all quite exhausted. My first recommendation is to fund affordable housing here in Revelstoke. I believe the province and this government believe in something bigger and better than survival of the biggest and richest. It's imperative that you invest in some affordable housing so that all participants in our economy can attract and retain employees. Our municipalities attempted to invest in affordable housing, but it's a difficult thing to do, as you heard earlier. The need is for hundreds of units, not a dozen here or there. Our lack of affordable housing really impacts our ability as a museum and every employer in Revelstoke to attract and retain employees. We can't get the workers that we need. It drives unhealthy turnover as we poach each other's staff. It drives up wage rates to levels that only for-profits can afford. And firms that provide us with necessary services like janitorial can't get the employees they need. And it's hard to run a tourist attraction or a civic cornerstone with dirty toilets and stained carpets. My second recommendation is to ask for sustained operating funding to museums. Revelstoke is profoundly changing its economic base and its character from a diverse industrial town into a resort municipality. Heritage institutions like mine and others here in Revelstoke are key in sustaining our local civic culture, that Revelstokeness, that things that makes us special, the reason why people come here to live. Our character is a competitive advantage for us, and our character is in danger because of this major change. Furthermore, tourism studies tell us that visitors crave authentic experiences and authentic environments, and museums, heritage organizations provide that. We're a key source of this authenticity, but we're not thriving. Our needs are somewhat unique because of the collections we hold, because of the work that we do. Channeling, and our operating costs are spiraling like crazy for the reasons mentioned earlier. Channeling funds to the BC Arts Council does not help us. I spoke to the BC Arts Council. I've been a repeat submitter of grant applications. They tell me they have no more capacity for operating funding. Clearly, there needs to be some other vehicle for providing sustained operating funding to heritage organizations. One idea I would humbly propose is with the City of Denver. The City of Denver earmarks a very small fraction of its sales tax for heritage arts and culture. This garners over $200 million annually for heritage arts and culture institutions. Even a smaller fraction in a place the size of BC would make a huge difference to our sector. I see my time has run out, and I want to be respectful of your time. I thank you for your patience.
Yes, Jim, thank you for your presentation and your Heritage Railway. I was just saying to Karin that I was made aware of your railway because in my riding is the Fraser Valley Heritage Railway Society that's there. And so there are similar asks that are out there. So on that note, are there any comments and or questions? George.
Yes. I understand your museum is quite famous, the Railway Museum in Revelstoke and Suriname, and I do agree that there should be some kind of funding to museums in British Columbia. A lot of the smaller museums are funded by municipality or the district, and I guess yours is the same, right? You did you do get some funding from, say, the city of Revelstoke?
Our actual cash funding is quite minimal. We do get relief on our property tax. We get a lot of help from city employees, but in terms of a stipend to help us operate the museum, that does not exist at present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, certainly very important in terms of building the tourism network right across BC with all these museums. I hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Ben.
Yes, just as you were talking with George here, I couldn't help but think about, the railways that run through town here and have made they've made Revelstoke what it is, the creation of it, etc. Do they have any interest in being supportive of what you're doing, being that you're talking about what they do and the railway?
We get very favorable treatment by the Canadian Pacific Railway, or now CPKC is now their new acronym, and that's in the form of in-kind support. So we have in-kind support in terms of our renting Craigellachie. We are the renters of Craigellachie. We operate a small store there. We do maintenance on that site. We also get support from Canadian Pacific in terms of collection storage for some of our collection, which is off-site. There are roughly 100 and some odd organizations in Canada that have railway equipment or some kind of a railway museum mandate or some railway content, and frankly it would be impossible for CPKC to provide monetary support to all of us. We have a very good partnership with them, and they are very supportive in a lot of ways. It just does involve handing over wads of cash to help us with our operating costs.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, thank you very much for your presentation today. I would encourage you to ensure that we get a written copy of that sent to us for us to take a look at in case there's some things that may or may not have been missed.
I did drop a couple of paragraphs at the end, and I will also attach to my written remarks a document about this sales tax program in the city of Denver. It is making a remarkable difference to the museum's heritage arts culture community there. It's unbelievable to see what they can do when they're not just trying to stay afloat.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
That comes close to concluding our hearings here today. I would like to take the time to make a couple of closing comments. First off, an event like this requires the help, and especially in a smaller community, of the local MLA. And in this case, it's MLA Klovechuck. And while I might mention his name as the MLA here, we all know that is not him that is herding the cats, that is calling out the names of people, trying to fill the spots, and in this case, get Jim here in a way that wasn't on the schedule. So Chelsea Muhlendyke, thank you very much for taking care of the community that we're in today. And on that note, a reminder to our listener that we will be in Penticton tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Contrary, carried. We are now on the road to Penticton. Thank you guys very, very much.